So, how do you see that the kinetic arts can serve corporate worship? I think we've heard a couple of examples where it's maybe been people have been closed to
Mhm.
the ways in which movement can serve corporate worship. But what are ways that you have seen that the kinetic arts can serve what we do in worship together?
Yeah, unless Kathleen, do you have something that you
No, go ahead,
like?
Julia.
Um, for this, for where my background is, and we sit, we stand, we may be asked to open our hands to receive a blessing, um, but that's about it. So that's kind of our, general movement that happens, in a typical worship setting, just kind of in my background. Along with that, I would like to, with that, I would like to, and I have begun to start to incorporate some more of those pedestrian movements, which are accessible movements to the normal human being, to someone who maybe even doesn't even want to stand. But instead of closing our bodies off for prayer or for confession or whatever, what if we open our hands and just lift our heads up? That creates kind of this vulnerable, you are lifting up your confession, your prayer requests, or anything, of just kind of changing this movement. And people might be like, make you feel really uncomfortable as they're doing it. But for a few people, it'd be like, oh, that just brought some freshness to how I prayed, how I approached that part of the liturgy, and all of that too. Also, maybe with that too, just inviting people to, if there's words in the songs that I don't like, it when it's like we lift our hands and no one's lifting their hands, so it's like, let's lift our hands. So, and that's one thing that I cannot stand. And so if I have anything to do with anything in the worship service, I'm like, raise your hands. But yes, just being conscious of kind of even the movement, words in scripture, the postures of worship in scripture. We hear kneeling, bowing, standing, lifting our hands, clapping, even laying prostrate, right? So using a lot of that movement, and those are all pedestrian movements, but being kind of more conscious of kind of what those things really mean in scripture, and kind of bringing them to life, bringing freshness to the liturgy. Even offering too, right? You can do that with your hands and with your hearts, and bring those to the Lord, rather than physically putting your money in the plate or whatever too. Offering can kind of look a little different physically, as another idea. So.
One of the things that Julia brought up, which is so true, why do we have words to songs that say, lift up holy hands and bless the Lord? We have these things, and I'm standing in church, and the choir is saying it, and no one's doing it, and it's like, are you serious? I mean, why are the words there? So the purpose behind the words, the purpose behind the liturgy, the purpose of using verbs to tell us what to do, which of course from the Psalms, which of course, lift up holy hands and bless the Lord. All of these things. David had to dance, which is going to be part of my second book, because when they finally got the ark and he got the instructions correct, first time, death came because he didn't follow God's order. When Uriah touched, when he finally went back and read what God told him, no, Levites, no, nah, when he finally got it, David was a musician, he was a singer. But at that moment, he had to physically explain to God that he was so grateful that not only did he follow, but God's presence was there. So part of being in church, we walk in. Some churches you may kneel, at the cross, you may do these gestures, you say hello to someone, you gesture, you can't say it and go, hi, Julia, hi, Paul. And you're not even looking at them. I mean, there's no communication. you know, and so the pedestrian movements, which I'm so grateful, there's a thing with modern dances and ballet dances, and sometimes ballet dancers can be very, and modern dances could just be down to earth, right? But the pedestrian movements are the movements that are accessible. When you just did that simple opening up the palm, right? Lifting up the head, even if it's just a little bit, that little bit for a person that can hardly lift up their head is monumental for their spirit to understand that God sees them, right? And so those are the accessibilities, and those are the things that God welcomes, right? When we share and pass the peace, we're moving, we're shaking. All righty, how do you pass the peace and you don't hardly look at anybody? Peace. What? Are you serious? And so I think within worship, there's just avenues of accessibility that movement allows to come and allow people to break down barriers and to love even the more.
Mm. That's really good. That's really good. I love the term pedestrian gestures. Right, and I think it maybe it breaks out of a stereotype that the kinetic arts are only for dancers, only for trained dancers, and we actually realize that no, they're for all of us. Those who can dance and those who can't dance, and those who don't want to dance and those who love to dance. that we all have movement, and there are ways that we can be intentional about that movement to communicate to others, to communicate to God, and to receive from others and receive from God.